I've been wanting to do a presentation about dental decay and stress, or at least talk about it for a little while. And I thought I'd include. I've done a presentation about stress, so I've added tooth decay to that. It's not that unusual to hear information about stress, but it's perhaps a I've pulled it together in a particular way with a view to thinking about biodynamic psychotherapy as well. But to also include, through all my study of stress and allostatic load, I also started investigating dental decay and discovered quite a few things around that, which I don't really think are pulled together in a way. So I've tried to do that and include that in this presentation. So that's about midway through. And so I hope this will be useful. And also, I'm actually quite interested in this subject. So if anyone has any thoughts, please share them. And it's speculative as well because I've kind of been thinking about my own dental decay and noticing just my own observations of myself and people I know and my own studies and research and what I found out. So it's quite speculative, and I'm not 100% sure of the impact of all the things. I'm going to share a few tips perhaps. In my own life, I think there's been some success. I haven't had to have a filling for quite a few years now. And I'm sort of starting to learn about the things that can be quite helpful for the enamel of the teeth to prevent decay, how what products to use and that kind of thing. But of course, it is quite speculative, and I don't know the impact of some of this stuff on the whole system. So it's very much studies, but I wanted to share it all. And here I'm going to share my presentation now. Hopefully, this will work. Um, so this is a presentation about anatomy and physiology of the stress response, including the concept of allostatic load. Some of this stuff I might just leave briefly go over, and you can always pause it to read the details. But there's so it's I'm not so interested in the details of the presentation, but more to kind of have a general sense of what stress is. Obviously, we all know there's some stress which is encourages us to do things. If we didn't have stress, we wouldn't be alive because our bodies are in stress just by being alive, and running for a train, then we catch the train, putting energy into a job application so we get a job, cooking some food so that we eat, we put ourselves under stress. So there's different levels of stress, but there's very clearly stress which is toxic for the body, as well as stress which helps us function. The references um, they're detailed at the end of the presentation, so you can pause later as well. Um, Hans Selye made a differentiation between eustress and distress, and stress which is motivating and stress that's difficult to cope with. Every gardener knows that the greenhouse does not produce the most resilient strains, and every athlete knows that without forcing himself past the limit of his physical comfort, no new limits of strength or endurance may be reached. That's in Job's Body, which is a really interesting book. And in, to remember what that reference is, BPS, the body responds to start. It's a biodynamic reference. It's Gerda Boyton. I can't remember what that book is. I think it might be her book. The body responding to startle reflex takes a strong breath in to provide the air needed for a vocal reaction, swearing, crying, laughing, etc. And there is a tightening of the flexor muscles to gather the strength needed to move into action, hitting, holding on, seeking help, etc. So something happens. What do we need to do? We're going to fall off. We're going to fall off the wall. We have to grab onto something to hold on. We're going to fall down the stairs, hold the banister. Someone's coming at us. We need to deflect them or something like that. I don't know. Animal testing shows sluggish fight or flight responses in clinically stressed creatures who haven't received stimulation of any kind in their lifetime. So even when they have stress hormones in their bloodstream, they're sluggish, their responses are sluggish. So the fight or flight response is slow to kick in and it's slow to shut down after the threat is removed. So animals that have got the kind of toxic levels of stress don't really function in a very healthy way when it comes to stress coming into their lives. That's another reference from Job's body. So there's a sense of too little stress, optimum stress, and too much stress. And at the optimum level, we function well. Below optimum, we have fatigue. Above optimum, we go into exhaustion and overload and it breaks us down, breaks our systems down. We don't function. Allostatic load is defined as the body's effort to adapt to stress that has led to it becoming overloaded. The stress response becomes a threat to itself. It's caused by cumulative wear and tear on the body from repeated or chronic persistent stress. The sorts of compromises our bodies make to cope with stress typically involve a hope that things will get better again, and then we will have time to recover and repair the damage. But until that happens, we may find ourselves in poor health. So the body, the stress response is designed to be a short-lived survival, which then gets overcome, meets the need, it meets the situation, and then it recovers and we go back and we start again on a level, ideally. Negative health consequences of allostatic load, which is when we've gone into the suboptimal, too much stress. No, not suboptimal. What's the opposite to that? Post-optimal, over the top. Immune system anti-inflammatory response of the body leads to failure to respond to infection. Adrenaline prevents parasympathetic activation, so the internal organs, the internal systems, organs and muscles get no rest. The reproductive system is undermined. There's an increased risk of insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, not least due to reduced sleep and exercise. Learning is impeded as the brain can't rest and focus. Our modes of perception are altered. Personality is affected. The person becomes more aggressive, depressed, anxious, paranoid, competitive, for instance, and not limited to. Persistent muscular tension, muscular armour. That's Reich's term for it. And the other thing I haven't added in this, because the presentation didn't include it at the time, is it is the response of the mouth as well, the dental issues. The body's sapping everything from all of aspects of itself in order to meet the stress needs. So it kind of says teeth aren't so important, this isn't so important. What's important is we actually survive. Stress is a natural physiological reaction to any condition that threatens homeostasis. I wonder if this, I don't know if you're going to miss this corner of the window because of my picture being up there, but never mind, I can't really move it. Stress is a natural physiological reaction to any condition that threatens homeostasis. The body reacts with allostasis, which is the mechanism of regulation that adjusts and adapts the body to environmental demands. It's finding the harmonious kind of balance for the body in terms of what it thinks is a balance anyway. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis coordinates physiological and behavioral adjustments and changes in the body. And the system uses neurotransmitters, hormones, and other signaling mechanisms. Examples include changes in the pattern of blood flow to restore normal body temperature. So if you're very nervous, you become very hot, you might start sweating. The body is regulating its resources and energy storage in the way it finds most efficient. Fight or flight responses, and they are systemic to the whole body. And the thing that's not included in this diagram is dry mouth, muscular tension. There's a lot that in every aspect of the body responds. It's a whole system response. A bit more of the detail of the sort of technical side of it. The HPA orchestrates the stress response in the body. The hypothalamus secretes a chemical known as corticotropin releasing factor, CFR, into the bloodstream. And this was all kind of new to me when I studied it. I'm not an expert in this at all. CFR then quickly circulates into the pituitary gland, where it triggers the release of a second chemical that is manufactured and stored there, which is the adrenocorticotropic hormone, aka ACTH. The ACTH in the blood reaches the adrenal glands, which stimulates them to release their chemicals into the bloodstream, in particular adrenaline and cortisol, activating the body's fight or flight mode. This presentation doesn't really include freeze or fawn, which are other responses to stress. But that's kind of another study, really. These chemicals travel around the body, communicating the state of alert, and the body and the bodily systems, organs, and muscles are triggered to change in their functioning in response to communications from the HPA. At this point, the hypothalamus, monitoring and registering excess levels of adrenaline and cortisol, can turn off its CRF response once the threat is passed. Parasympathetic nervous system regulates the body's return to a state of physiological balance. Adrenaline and cortisol prepare us for fight or flight, both immediate and more sustained, putting us in a state of hyperarousal in preparation for physical conflict or rapid escape. Adrenaline increases heart rate, blood pressure, and directs blood flow and energy to the muscles, charging the muscles with tension in readiness for action. Cortisol regulates blood pressure, suppresses inflammation, aids healing in anticipation of physical injury, affects the metabolism, and controls the sleep-wake cycle, and is involved in the body's immune response, including an anti-allergic action. Cortisol increases the available energy in the body by promoting and prioritizing the breakdown of proteins, primarily in the liver, also the muscles, to form glucose, releasing it into the bloodstream to fuel the brain and muscles. This is an emergency solution that avoids using the more time and energy consuming digestive system. So in other words, we stop eating and the body starts eating itself. It's effectively the body's consuming itself for its own survival so that we can be alert and ready to react without delay. So we haven't got time to eat and digest because we're in an emergency. There's a response to stress is individualized. It's very personal. And there are many factors involved in perception of stress, real or perceived. And one of the major factors, family, this is kind of, the ACEs is a major one of these. The ACEs, which I'll mention in a minute, but it's just a general, depending on our circumstances, think we can respond to stress very differently to another person. One thing might be very scary. If someone has had a negative experience of a dog when they're a child and they have a phobia of a dog running towards them will cause them to be in a very different state of arousal that than a person who's had no bad experiences and just very positive experiences of dogs. So it could go from terror, absolute terror, to delight. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. Examples are physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, household dysfunction, if parents were, if there was substance abuse or someone was in prison, these kind of factors, neglect, physical or emotional, community violence, discrimination, chronic instability, war, for instance. And the health impact of ACEs is massive. There's a strong correlation with chronic health issues, mental and physical. And there's a lot of studies on this. High ACEs scores are linked to HPA axis dysregulation, i.e., the stress system on high alert. And high ACEs levels is goes hand in hand with barriers to healthcare and therapy due to mistrust, stigma, and social economic hardship. They just it just piles up. It just piles up. So there's this triangle here. This is a sense of how this works for people. Maybe someone comes from a generational hit, all down the line. There's great grandparents. Maybe they were in a war situation, or they had neglect. They pass it on. It never gets it doesn't get resolved, so it gets passed on to the next generation. So there's historic trauma, social conditions, local context. Perhaps those people then don't have a home and they have to be homeless, and maybe they're in emergency home accommodation, or they live in the worst conditions. Perhaps with lots of other people who've also got a great deal of trauma in their lives, and it becomes a kind of it's more difficult to function, leading to the child born into that family having a difficult life in a huge number of different ways. That child then has disturbed neurodevelopment, that then causes issues in schools. And if anyone's seen the film, I Swear, about this man who has Tourette's, his the impact of this. He's already got a difficult family upbringing. He then develops this neuro brain issue condition, which has an impact on how he's treated at school. He's treated very negatively. He's punished for his difficulties. He's been treated as though he's naughty when he can't help it. So the impact just snowballs. He's laughed at. He's beaten up. People are mistaking his behaviour for aggression. He's imprisoned, arrested. So social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. And then there's an adoption of health risk behaviours, which we'll just look at in a sec. Disease, disability, and social problems, and very much statistically correlation with early death. So you can imagine people have got a very stressful life. That might go hand in hand with a lack of physical activity. They might not have the motivation to go out and go for a walk. They might not have the circumstances that make it okay to go for a walk, even. They might turn to things that are soothing: smoking, alcoholism, drug use, food, severe obesity. These can result in severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, high risk sexual behaviour. So, the STDs, heart disease, cancer, strokes, COPD, and broken bones, missed work. So you can sort of see the sense of how these how these issues associated with ACEs can kind of just be so pervasive. I wanted to talk about tooth decay along the same lines. So what I've really wanted to focus on is the with ACEs scores and allostatic load, how stress increases magnesium loss. This is one particular aspect of the many things that come from a high stress level associated with ACEs, high ACEs score. So the magnesium loss causes a deficiency in the body, which in turn enhances the body's susceptibility to stress, resulting in a vicious cycle. That snowballing in this cycle that's kind of, it's very difficult to interrupt it. The more difficult things are, the more difficult they become. So this is kind of quite well illustrated with magnesium. Magnesium, if when there's a magnesium deficiency, there's an impact on dental enamel for a start. It also is reflected in bones as well. So stress levels are associated with dry mouth because of anxiety and stress, and that affects the saliva in the mouth, which is then the saliva is not there to protect the teeth. The saliva moistens and breaks down food, washes away food particles from the teeth and gums, and helps people with swallowing. In addition, saliva contains minerals such as calcium and phosphate that help keep teeth strong and fight tooth decay. And couple all that with an increased risk of addictions. When people are in a high stress, when they're in the high stress condition, that is allostatic load. So then people have a high risk of addictions, food, sugar, alcohol, and the increased risk of medications such as antidepressants, which actually cause dry mouth as well. So I've got here, there's some things here that can help, which I've found just in my own sort of studies. It's very important to think about remineralization. And things that can help that: bone broth, which is collagen, magnesium, and xylitol. And there's a lot we can find out about xylitol and its health, its impact for teeth and bones in studies at the moment. Here's a few helpful resources, hopefully. And there's some studies here on magnesium. The first one, oral manifestations of magnesium and vitamin D inadequacy. Inadequacy of these essential minerals is associated with delayed tooth eruption and with enamel and dentin hypoplasia. Taking calcium without magnesium results in soft dental enamel, which cannot resist the acids causing tooth decay. So this, for me, this has been really helpful because starting using magnesium, and I would use powder, put it in a glass of water, swill it around, perhaps with some Himalayan rock salt to make the water a bit salty, because that's also helpful for the teeth. So swill it around at night. It also helps relaxation because magnesium is helpful to reduce stress levels, and it just creates the conditions to remineralize the teeth, and that hardens the enamel. And I've seen it in my own mouth. I've really experienced this, so that the teeth are then stronger and more able to do their job, to eat and not be able to. So, for instance, if you're avoiding sugar because of tooth decay, if you start doing this, you probably have a bit more resistance to the decay that's caused by sugar. And it's good to avoid. Obviously, it's really good to avoid sugar as well. Magnesium and stress, another study. Magnesium status is highly associated with stress levels, with both stress and hypomagnesemia reflecting each other's negative effects. Indeed, hypomagnesemia has been associated with stressful conditions such as photosensitive headache, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, audiogenic stress, cold stress, and physical stress, amongst others. So, how important to note this, the magnesium how has such a profound effect, systemic effect, so affecting migraines, general physical difficulties like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. So it's very interesting how important this is. Magnesium status and stress, the vicious cycle concept revisited. This study, numerous studies, it says, both in preclinical and clinical settings, have investigated the interaction of magnesium with key mediators of the physiological stress response and demonstrated that magnesium plays an inhibitory key role in the regulation and neurotransmission of the normal stress response. Furthermore, low magnesium status has been reported in several studies assessing nutritional aspects in subjects suffering from psychological stress or associated symptoms. This overlap in the results suggests that stress could increase magnesium loss, causing a deficiency, and in turn, magnesium deficiency could enhance the body's susceptibility to stress, resulting in a magnesium and stress vicious cycle. These are products that I use. There's this tooth powder which is a remineralizing, and you can put it on your toothbrush and brush with it. I actually use that with coconut oil as well, because coconut, I haven't put these on, but this coconut oil is also good for your teeth, as far as I'm aware. And I mean, I use it and it seems to be beneficial. So coconut oil, and I didn't put Himalayan rock salt on this either, but with water. Magnesium powder, swirl that in around your mouth. Xylitol and bone broth. I actually mix those together and have a spoonful of those after eating, and then there's a one of the links there is to a dentist. Let's just check. Here we go. Dr. Ellie Phillips. She talks a lot about using xylitol, as a lot of dentists do, using xylitol after eating. And then it's very important to leave the mouth without any more eating after that, so that the saliva can take in these things, xylitol, and it just gives the mouth a chance to sit with the saliva, so that the mouth can be kind of cleansed, using its own natural processes. The the dentists will talk about mouth attacks, eating as a mouth attack, and have no more than 5 a day of those. So in one eat, then let the mouth rest. No more than 5 a day is the advice of conventional dentistry. Okay, so moving on. There's a learned response to stress. This is a quote from Job's Body, and it kind of just again shows this sort of snowballing potential for stress if we can't break the cycle. So Job's Body, he says, have I learned to minimize my losses, recuperate efficiency, and move on? Or have I learned to ignore unpleasant symptoms until the damage is so extensive that I'm forced to succumb? Or have I learned to react to symptoms with additional diverting symptoms, discomforts of my own making, which may effectively mask the original problem, but which can join it in a vicious cycle that can make its consequences far more severe? Again, our response to stress is very personal. Talking about biodynamic psychotherapy, the concept of the vasomotoric cycle, we charge to have an act to do something, and then we achieve it. We run for the bus. We see the bus is coming. we charge, we run for the bus, we get there, we get on the jump on the bus, we go and sit down, wind down, relax. Okay, and then we're ready to start all over again. Um, in allostasis, the body ideally returns to its former state of balance between contraction and expansion, and the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. This happens only once emotional expression has been able to take place. If the natural biological rhythm is interrupted, muscular tension, restricted breathing, and finally postural changes result. Allostatic load intensifies startle reflex. Without being able to complete the cycle, the flexors and the respiratory muscles, especially the diaphragm, become permanently stuck in a state of slight contraction, as if the cause of the shock were still present. The body is then in a state of repression, a physical state of somatic compromise, hypertonic rigidity, muscular armor, or hypertonic, overstretched and soft, hypotonic, sorry. Thus, a momentary impulse becomes a chronic reaction state manifested by muscular anticipation and or resignation. Residual startle patterns can build upon one upon the other. Psychoperistalsis is the physical discharge, which is the body's processing, the digestion of stress, of stimulus, is the physical discharge of nervous tension in the abdomen, and you'll hear that through the stethoscope in biodynamic work. Prevention and cure, well, things like massage and somatic therapies and other therapies which are really sympathetic to the body's system, internal family systems, for instance. Anything that allows the body to take control of its own system in a way. Physical exercise, running, dance, adequate rest and sleep. And to note again that these are the things that are least accessible to those who are most in chronic stress situations. Psychological and spiritual practices such as meditation, prayer, and mindfulness, which are those things that are trauma informed, can buffer stress and aid recovery. Having a sense of meaning, belonging, or faith increases resilience, self-reflection, talk therapy, and journaling. So it can be a long journey to get to these places, if at all. Lifestyle adjustments, healthy eating, avoiding excessive stimulants, healthy exercise, building support networks, setting boundaries, time management, and seeking professional support if stress becomes overwhelming. To conclude, stress involves the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. The whole person in context, family, culture, environment, social network. Spiritual and socio-economic factors shape stress levels and resources and our individual response to stress. Chronic stress leads to allostatic load, leads to long-term health risks. We have a learned response to stress, and there are ways to avoid vicious cycles of intensifying stress. For instance, just including magnesium in the diet. At the end of the day, helping sleep. These are little ways to break through the vicious cycle of stress, of the intensification of it. But again, it's how do we get access to this when we have a very stressful life, we don't even know about these things because they're not really talked about. So, the biodynamic perspective, emotional expression and body release are crucial. Some key texts. So that was the one I was wondering what it was called. Between Psyche and Soma, Gerda Boyson's book. Dean Johan, Job's Body. I can't remember how you pronounce his name. And there's a collection of papers of biodynamic psychotherapy or psychology, which is accessible. I can put a link to where you can get that. Some helpful quotes, which I'll not read through. Wait, I'll go. Hang on. I'll yeah, that you can just read those. I'll stop sharing now. Um my tummy. Yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. I'll be really interested to hear any comments and responses. Thank you, everyone.